What if creating healthier workspaces isn't necessarily about doing more, but about enabling staff to feel safer, seen, and supported? This is Behind the Button. Hello, and welcome to Behind the Button, the podcast that really lifts the lid on what goes on behind the scenes within the world of pay. I'm Adrian Goddard, CIPP's Commercial Director, and today I am here with the one and only Sarah MacIntosh, CEO of Mental Health First Aid England. Welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, Sarah, before we go any further, we've got a tradition on Behind the Button whereby we ask you a question from a former guest.
Okay.
So, your question is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
That's a biggie, right? Oh my word. Okay. I think my advice would be bolder and be braver. You know, sometimes I think especially in roles where you want to help people and put other people first and focus on them, you kind of forget about yourself, don't you, a little bit, and what you need. And so, especially as an introvert as well, so I'm a huge introvert leader, which has its strengths and also has its challenges.
I love that though. Yes, introvert leader and CEO. Absolutely. Why not,
Yeah.
right?
But if I could go back, I'd be like, do you know what? Be a little bit bolder and be a little bit braver and be a little bit more unapologetic at times, because I think sometimes you can kind of go through your career journey and you're a little bit like, oh, should I do that? How's the other person going to feel if I do that? Actually, obviously with the benefit of hindsight, which is a brilliant thing, that if I could go back in the little time machine, I'd be like, be bolder, be braver, be more unapologetic.
So within our profession, within the world of, pay, there's so much pressure, for the individuals who are responsible for the pay and the financial well-being of the workforce, and the deadlines, and they've got to get it right and it's got to get out by payday. But at the same time, there's not just the pressure of doing the role, but also the pressure of those in the workforce that they support as well, and the emotive connection with pay. So all the more, this is why we felt it's so important to have someone like yourself on, who is spearheading Mental Health First Aid England, to just help to support, our community and the wider workforce as well.
Absolutely. Payroll professionals are amazing, aren't they? If you think about, there are a number of different roles in an organisation, in a workplace, who have such a bearing on your well-being and how you feel and what's going on for you. So from a payroll point of view, pay, benefits, getting the most out of them, one of the most important things in the old hierarchy of needs.
Absolutely. So before we jump into, leadership and workplace culture and things like that, really interesting to find out just about you, outside of work, who is Sarah?
Wow, that's a big question. I am Sarah. I am a mum. I live in the Northwest, as you know. I'm married to a paramedic. I have 2 kids. I have 2 dogs. I love music. I love comedy.
Sounds like a lot of exciting things there. I've got to ask you, what breed of dog have you got?
I have got a King Charles Cavalier called Ruby.
Nice.
And I have a Cocker Spaniel called Molly, who's much more energetic and interesting, I would say.
I had a sense you were going to say Cocker Spaniel. We've got a Cocker Spaniel as well, and yeah, absolutely full of energy.
Oh, I love them.
And just again, outside of work, what are some of the things that inspire you?
I'm pretty driven just by helping people, being nice and doing nice things for people. So most of my time is spent with my kids, or I'm a carer for my mum as well. So I spent looking after her, taking her to different medical appointments and things. So busy doing that, to be honest. There's not a huge amount of extra time to wedge things into, but when I can, I like to go out with my friends, socialise, see a bit of live music, and just generally have a little bit of a laugh and a giggle, because that's what life's all about at the end of the day.
So, you've built a career around helping people to thrive at work, but was there like a particular experience for you that first sparked your passion for doing what you do today?
I would say, based on the role that I'm in now, I think there are probably 2 key parts of my life that ended up leading me to this role, I guess, or
Okay.
maybe 3 actually. Firstly, growing up, I lived with my mum. She was a single mum, and she lived with mental ill health. So she had anxiety, what was then called panic disorder, and also agoraphobia as well. So mental health for me was mental ill health. It wasn't different. It wasn't not normal. It was just everyday life. Like I just assumed everybody else's house was like that when they went home from school. So I kind of grew up with quite a number of conversations around mental health. And then in my late teens, I also experienced mental ill health myself.
Okay.
And I was at college, and I also had a part-time job. And I think at that point, what I realised was the huge amount of stigma attached to mental health and the real lack of people just not knowing what to say or what to do or how to deal with things where people are struggling. So whether it was at college, whether it was at work, I really felt, not only for myself because there was no support there, but also for other people, because I could see it was hard for them as well, trying to work out, well, what do I say? Am I going to make it worse if I say something? Should I just not say anything? So I think mental health had a huge influence early on in my life. And then really my career pathway didn't follow on from that. I started life in financial services. Brilliant, sort of 13 years of my life in financial services. And I started off life really just wanting to help people with their money and helping them to buy their first home and move house. And I loved it. It gave people so much joy, kind of helping them, solving their problems, getting them to buy an exciting new home or move home at a big pivotal moment in their life. And I just loved helping people. And from there, at the time, this was the 90s, and there were 2 major things that happened in financial services in the 90s. The first was customer experience became a huge thing. It had come over from the US.
Yeah.
It was all about the customer journey, designing end-to-end, building in amazing moments of joy for customers, removing barriers, making things easier for them to do business with you. But also the second thing that was happening at the same time was organisational culture and vision and values was also coming along. And so I was really lucky when I worked in financial services. There was a huge programme around customer experience, culture, values and employee experience and how you align the two. And I joined a programme to do that. And I absolutely loved it. I loved looking at people's experiences. Like the fact that you could focus on how somebody felt when they did business with you or how they felt as an employee, and you could do things that would change that and improve that, was amazing. And a huge part of that work was focusing on different types of employees and different customers. So focusing on disabled customers, for example, or we focused a lot at the time. We talked about Black, Asian, minority ethnic. We use different language now, but really focusing in on, well, how is the experience different and why, and what extra lever or different lever might you need to pull so that somebody gets the same level of experience. And I just loved it. I loved helping people. I loved talking to people about their good experiences, their bad experiences, their barriers, and then working out what to do about it and make it better.
Let me touch on 2 things off the back of what you said then, right? You talked about you being a carer, and you also talked about your own mental well-being and the challenges that you faced, right? Now, there's many people in the workforce, or a number of people in the workforce right now, and people that I know as well in the workforce right now, who have to also care for a family member, namely usually their parents or even a child as well, and have their own like mental pressure that they go through because of that experience, as well as the demands at work. So how would you speak to them and encourage them in regards to how they can best manage living with that kind of lifestyle and also managing themselves?
It's tough, it's a big balance, isn't it? I think in anybody's personal life, there are things going on at home, things going on at work. Sometimes there are things going on in both spaces, and that can be quite overwhelming. But carers in particular, there's all sorts of extra pressure and extra time that you need to devote to different people, and that takes a lot of energy. Quite often in our training, we talk about the stress bucket. And the stress bucket, you've probably seen different versions of this on TikTok or on videos.
Picture it embedded in my mind.
Because you've been on the training. Amazing. So the idea is that everyone's got kind of a stress bucket or a stress container, but actually the size of that container is different for different people, and that's usually based on kind of levels of resilience. So that might change at different points in time. It might be constant for you, but nobody's container is the same size. And at any one time, you've got a number of things in that container going on. It might be some work stuff, might be some home stuff, you know, it might be some education, you know, you might be doing some exams, those, you know, lots and lots of different things that you are worried about that are absorbing your time and your energy and your worry. And it's the point at which that stress container starts to get a bit full and starts to overflow, that's when people start to struggle, really. So quite often we talk about two things, really. One is, how do we minimise the stresses from the number of things that are in your stress container, and how can you take some kind of ownership? Where can you get some support from to support you with those? But we also talk about the tap on the side of the stress bucket and the container. So what are your coping strategies? You know, how do you release some of that pressure? And lots of people will do lots of different things as sort of protective factors for their mental health that help them. It might be me with music and comedy or socialising. It might be quiet time. You know, all sorts of different things, that gardening for some people, you know, their well-being. So it's kind of getting the balance of making sure you're not overflowing in your container, but also making sure you've got the right coping strategies and mechanisms in place as well. So when you're a carer, you know, that's already a sizable section of your stress container that's full, in addition to your normal daily life, in addition to what's going on at work as well. So it's really quite tough, but having some really great coping mechanisms, support for you as well, not just about you supporting the other person, I think is absolutely key.
I thought when I did the training, I thought that was such a fantastic aspect of the learning. And I took away, I literally wrote a list of coping mechanisms as well.
Brilliant.
For things that just like, for my tap, right? For things that, you know, that supported me. So that always stuck with me, and something that I've spoken to a number of people about as well. Because just having that outlet, you know, so that bucket doesn't overflow, you have that breakdown, everything like that. So touching on the financial well-being side of things and all the work that you had done, especially at a point in time where I guess financial well-being wasn't really, because you mentioned the 90s, right? So financial well-being not being something that's, I would argue, anywhere near as prominent as what it is now, or your organisations being accountable for the financial well-being of their employees, right? So you started that early on. But what were some of the kind of, I guess, methods in regards to how you engaged with employees, and also some of the impact that you saw in how employees responded?
This is quite interesting, actually, because you're right, it's definitely developed over time. I think in the 90s, especially in financial services, there was actually quite a lot on financial wellbeing, but it was about customers, and it was about arrears and arrears management, and making sure that they were okay and how we could help them. So I actually think quite a lot of the good stuff that's come out that we now use for employees probably started off with service users paying bills, or customers not falling into arrears in lots of different businesses. But I think what we've seen develop through to kind of employees is employers have taken much more of a responsibility in terms of education around financial wellbeing, because they've definitely recognised that actually the more they can do to make people aware, the more they can offer by way of their benefits and support, the more engaged, motivated, the better their well-being is, and that's better for productivity. So we've definitely seen a shift in kind of the business case and the reasons and the energy for wanting to get more involved in that and help people. I think some of the best organisations I see are the ones that don't just rely on, you know, a provider, a benefits provider, and go, oh yeah, we do financial well-being, but it's over there. Go and have a look at it. You know, the ones that do really, really well are the ones that really think about it. So I can remember in one organisation, you know, from a payroll point of view, what's some of the scariest moments from a payroll point of view? Well, it's usually when you first start a job and you're not quite sure if you're going to get paid for next month, or you're going to miss the cut-off, or if you get a promotion or you change job and you're not quite sure what that's going to do to your pay, or your tax code changes. And I remember that there was one guy in particular in payroll, and he knew that, he got that, and he really felt that. And so he'd do things like, in part of the induction, we're going to talk to you about your payslip and what it says and how to read it and how to interpret it and what your tax code means if you've got any questions. Brilliant. If you were a new starter, he'd reach out. I mean, you know, depending on the size of your organisation, obviously, but there are ways in which you can do this. He would reach out and make sure people knew for day one, ideally before day one, this is what's going to happen from your pay in case you're worried, and give some FAQs. And I think for me, the ones that are proactive and are preempting those moments of financial worry or concern, I think do really, really well.
Nice.
In addition to the we've got some great benefits, here's how to get the most out of them, and here's an external provider you can get some advice from for debt or whatever. You know, if you couple all those things together, I think that's where people think that they can see you really care about it and it's important to you, not just them.
I think that's an absolute gem what you've talked about there, right? And especially in regards to just from the off, from when somebody joins an organisation, getting in front of them, talking to them about their pay, you know, they then know from the off who the point of call is as well, and understanding of the pay slip and, you know, all that kind of stuff. It resonates a lot because I was at an event recently where somebody said that, I think they called them pay clinics or something that, where people could drop in and just literally have conversations about their pay and better understand it, which they said they had great uptake and was really popular and worked well again in just getting the pay function to the forefront, you know, in front of the staff and really supporting that financial well-being piece.
It gets you closer to people as well, doesn't it? And I also think that gives you, as an employer, it gives you an amazing set of insight. What people were worried about, how else can we help them? What benefits would they actually really benefit from that we don't offer at the moment? You know, I think there's such a lot of rich insight from getting closer to your employees, not just about supporting them, that, you know, why wouldn't you do it?
So for yourself on your journey, I know you've worked across, you know, finance, HR, diversity, you know, inclusion and whatnot, and from these specialist roles and leadership roles all the way up to now being CEO. So how has your, I guess, approach and perspective changed over that period of time, especially when it comes to managing the well-being or being a part of the management of the well-being within the workforce?
I think at the core, most of it is still very much the same. So most of it is still boils down to that. How are people feeling? What experiences are they having? How can you improve them? I think as you know, people that are in manager roles, leadership roles, CEO roles, as you kind of progress that, you just have to balance that a bit more with the business case for it. Like the language that you use might shift a little bit more subtly about why you're doing something and the benefits of it. So I think when I first started out, it was very much about how can we help that person and what's the benefits for that person. And as I've kind of evolved and progressed, you still do that, but you go, and it also means that it has this benefit for an organisation, or to reduce sickness absence, or improve retention levels, or add to your bottom line, you know. And I think now that I'm in the CEO role here at Mental Health First Aid, we do quite a lot of work trying to lobby and influence government as well. So it also has now gone to and what's the economic benefit for the wider, as well as the wider health, you know, benefits, you know, from a public health outcome point of view. So you kind of, your sphere of focus and your business benefit focus gets kind of bigger, I think, as you have to think about engaging more people who might not necessarily be in the, well, why wouldn't you do it? Because it's just great for that person there, right? You know, like trying to engage other people who might need a bit more convincing. You know, you just expand your language, your vocab, and how you talk about things.
How important do you think listening is in regards to, because the three things that you phrased was around really understanding your employees, basically, and the benefits, you know, for them. But how important is listening?
For me, it's crucial. You can't be a good mum, a good partner, a good mental health first aider, a good manager, a good service provider if you don't listen. And you have to listen more than you talk, because for me, we talked about rich insights before. You know, whatever it is you're trying to do, whatever type of organisation you are in, you exist to improve something, change something, deliver something. If you're not listening and finding out how people feel, what they need, and how those needs change over time, at some point you're not going to be as good as you were before, and those people are not going to get the best out of you, and they're not going to get the best for themselves as a result of that. So yeah, absolutely crucial. A lot of our training talks about listening. It's a core fundamental foundation, particularly around mental health and well-being. Is actually most people need to offload, need to talk without interruption about how they're feeling, how it's impacting them. And then once they've got that out, you can then work on trying to help them, support them, and signpost them to the right help. So it's absolutely crucial.
Again, just tying back, I guess, a little bit for what you said there and what we talked about a little bit earlier as well. Generally within a payroll function, unless you're more like forward facing and proactive in how you're engaging with the workforce, many times it's more so you being communicated with. If it's not the odd thank you, which I hope more and more organisations are doing in appreciating, these professionals, they're usually engaged with when something goes wrong.
Yes.
So I guess within that context, how important do you think listening is, especially when you're dealing with such an emotive topic? And how can our pay professionals best manage that, especially in themselves staying centered, because they also can't get carried away emotionally, because, well, that could be detrimental, couldn't it, right? So what advice would you give to them?
Well, I think it's like anything, isn't it, in an organisation where you could be a line manager and actually 90% of the time when people come to you, it's because something's going wrong or they need advice and support. Payroll professionals, no different, a pivotal part of their culture creators, aren't they? Culture influencers in the way that they respond and deal with it. I think there's two things, really. I think you have to listen. If somebody's upset, a bit stressed about something, a bit worried about something, you've got to let them have that out and kind of share with them why it's so important to them, what's gone wrong, and kind of listen. You've then got to kind of relate and empathise and go, absolutely can see that. I can see that you're worried about X, Y, and Z. Let's have a look at what we can do about it. And I think the other part of that is recognising your limits as well. And quite often when you try to resolve somebody's problem, sometimes you can fix it in its entirety. Brilliant, great experience for the person, great experience for you because you've been able to support someone and it gives you a brilliant sense of, you've really helped that person. Sometimes you're not able to fix everything, or there's some things outside of your control. And I think being open and honest about, well, here's what I can do about it right now. Here's what I can control. But here are a few things that I can't because of and why. But, what that means is for you. And I think just being really open and honest. You can only do what you can do within the scope of your role, within what's available to you, within the processes, the rules that's available to you. But just showing empathy, really acknowledging the impact and being really honest about what you can do for them and what you can't do for them and why. I think it's just super important for anybody supporting anybody.
So if we broaden it a little bit to leaders, okay, and we look at, leaders within the workforce and, the encouragement, especially from what you've done earlier this year in regards to psychological safety, and bringing your whole self to work, everything like that. How important do you think it is for leaders to model that behaviour?
I think from a role modelling point of view, if you are a manager, a leader, a person of influence, and you feel able to bring your whole self to work, talk about it. Share your story, because if you feel able to do it and you do it, it will encourage other people to be able to do it. So I think it is super important. It shows people that they can be themselves. They can talk about different aspects of their identity, their home life, and not kind of have to put on. My youngest calls it a costume. I think he means uniform sometimes, but not have to put on your work uniform. Put on your costume. When you walk through the door of work, just come as you. The caveat, the reason I said there's two answers to that is sometimes it's not always easy for managers or leaders to be themselves at work for lots of different reasons, and that might be around their identity and stigma. That might be around their own mental health and well-being at that point in time. So you've got to recognise that yes, you're a manager and a leader, and we talk about role modelling a lot. Sometimes there are circumstances where they may not be able to do that, and that's okay. But I think where you can, try to talk about it, try to tell your story, try to be open so that others can follow, really.
If you're in an environment where you don't feel comfortable doing that or you can't do that, how can somebody best navigate that, especially if they want to?
Two different stories there, aren't there? Sometimes there's I want to bring my whole self to work, but I feel like I can't for some reason. And then there's also people who are like, in an ideal world, I'd love to, but I'm not ready or I'm not able to for lots of other reasons, not just what's going on at work. I think for me, it's just knowing that if you look at the role of manager in particular, so one of my favourite statistics, whenever you read anything that I write or any videos or podcasts, I will always trot out this statistic, and I am unapologetic about it because it's one of the most powerful statistics I've ever heard. So the Workforce Institute, about 18 months ago, did some research, and what they found was they were looking at the role of managers, and what they found was a manager has more influence on your mental health than that of your therapist or your GP, and equal to that of your partner. And that kind of makes
equal.
And
Oh
it
my
kind of makes
gosh.
sense when you think about it, because if you work full time and you're in a traditional manager type structure, I know not all sectors and organisations kind of work like that, but you know, the kind of traditional, you've got a manager and you're regularly talking to them and you regularly see them.
Yeah.
That kind of makes sense because they're seeing you at work all the time. They're having lots of conversations with you, maybe get a bit of social time with them. You're spending a lot of time with them in a lot of cases. And so they're probably best positioned to spot signs if you're struggling and offer you support. But equally, we know that the workplace can also be a massive stressor. So if you've got a really crap manager, the impact on your mental health is going to be massive because, again, the amount of time that you spend at work and how much that's going to influence probably what is a third of your life you're spending at work. So a third of your time is going to be influenced by somebody that's causing you issues. So that kind of makes sense, right? But then you look at the flip of it and you kind of go, well, okay, if managers have that much of an influence on people's mental health and their wider general health as well, why is there not a responsibility for them to have any form of training on how best to support somebody's mental health and well-being? Because that would be a game changer, wouldn't it?
I think so.
If every single manager knew how to have a great conversation, how to spot signs of someone struggling, how to offer support, how to signpost them quickly to support, that'd be fantastic. You know, have a huge influence on people's mental health and well-being generally.
If we think about leaders, right, when leaders are under pressure, or people who are in pressurized roles like the payroll profession, you know, I think that's a key time when culture is tested.
Yes.
So what behaviours do you think signals a really healthy culture within that kind of context?
It's probably easy to look at the flip of it, actually, and then work out how you could do the opposite.
Okay.
So if I look at, we've worked with over 20,000 workplaces now over the last 15 years, and we get little insights into people's culture and the different things that they do and what works and what doesn't work so well. One of the consistent things I've seen over the last probably 2-3 years, particularly since pandemic, is what quite often people describe as burnout being quite present and prevalent in an organisational culture. And I think from the conversations that I've had, I think it's really clear to me that what's been happening is when you are a person, so let's say a payroll professional, so you're in your role, you want to do a really good job, you want to make things better for other people, you want to be the best you can be in your role and help people as much as you can and meet those deadlines and make sure everything's accurate and, you know, be great in your role. There's been so much change over the last 4 or 5 years, even more change, I think, in the last 4 or 5 years than there has been prior to that. That what tends to happen in organisations is that change gets kind of overlaid on top of your normal day job. Yeah. And that provides a level of overwhelm for people. Now, overwhelm, you know, a little bit of stress is healthy for us in some circumstances. If it's short bursts of extra investment, energy or work or focus on something, you can cope with that, and it's actually really good for your mental health because it gives you a sense of additional purpose and a sense of achievement when you've kind of delivered something. But when that sort of overwhelm and stress is prolonged over a longer period of time, and one piece of change gets replaced with the next piece of change and the next piece of change, I think what we're seeing is that prolonged stress and overwhelm, and that's the key cause of burnout. And so quite often organisations are hearing the phrase used more and more, that people are saying, I'm feeling a bit burnt out actually because I'm not quite sure I can see the end of some of this change. When I say to people, do you know what burnout means, and do you definitely, you say you feel like you may be burning out, what does that mean to you and why do you think it's burnout?
I'm interested in what they say.
Most people can't answer the question actually.
Oh, really?
It tends to be a feeling, a gut feel of actually they use overwhelm a lot. I'm overwhelmed, workload's quite big. They tend to be the two most common things. But if you look at burnout and the research behind it, someone who's experiencing burnout, there has to be 3 things that are happening for burnout to be present. So firstly, is exhaustion. So feeling physically exhausted, emotionally exhausted, overwhelmed, overextended at work. That's kind of the first factor. And most people, to some extent, at various points, will feel that aspect. But the second thing that has to be present for burnout is what's called depersonalisation. And that's really all about cynicism and sort of almost shying away from your colleagues and your customers and your service users. And this doesn't have to be aggy publicly.
Yeah.
This can be your internal monologue of starting to be really cynical about the workplace and the people in it, and starting to get really annoyed by the person that's picking the phone up to say, my pay's not right. Like, starting to be quite cynical about it.
Okay.
And hating yourself, actually, for feeling that way, because that's not your normal go-to position. And then the third bit of burnout that has to be present for it to be burnout is that feeling of, I'm doing a crap job. It doesn't matter what I do, I'm not making a dent in this. I'm not having an impact. I'm feeling like I'm doing a rubbish job. The total of those three things together, that signifies, that is burnout. What does good look like? Managers who know what burnout is, but also staff that know what burnout is. So if you're a payroll professional, understanding what burnout is and the language with it, making sure your manager and the rest of your team perhaps knows about it, having open conversations about it, so that as soon as you start to think, overwhelm, workload, what can we do about this? You can have these conversations earlier, and you don't get to that point of burnout where nobody's said anything, nobody's noticed it. Everyone's just using the phrase burnout, but they don't really know whether it is definitely burnout or it's just a phrase because someone's feeling slightly stressed. And it's ignored. And then what effectively happens is three things will happen if you do nothing about it. One is, initially, the person will probably feel crap, should probably be off work, but they'll stay in work, so it'll be presenteeism. They'll stay in work, they might make loads more mistakes than normal as well, and that has an impact on them and has an impact on your organisation. If that carries on for a while, probably go off sick. You're going to lose them through sickness absence. And unless they can see a light at the end of the tunnel from all that change and all that overwhelm, they're probably going to leave, and you're going to have a retention problem. And all because
An additional cost
nobody's
from hiring somebody else,
huge
right?
costs to the individual, to the employer, huge costs of that turnover and re-recruiting and retraining somebody into that role. And all because you perhaps didn't have the right language or toolkit at the start.
And it's so intriguing just listening to you, right? I could probably listen to you all day to be honest.
Well, it's the best one anyone's ever said that to me, I'll tell you.
But yeah, you've really got to have an ear tuned in and aware, right?
Yes, definitely. But also for yourself as well. You know, it's not necessarily about being a manager and spotting it in others. Like, if you educate yourself a little bit and have that awareness as well, you can kind of go, oh, hang on a minute, I need to do something about this, because I can't, if I continue, it's going to get worse for me. So when we do mental health first aid training, quite often people will say, best training I've ever been on. I go into my organisation, I know I can help people, but the most immediate benefit quite often is for the individual that goes through the training.
Hello.
Yeah. They go, oh my God, actually, this is a thing for me, and I need to think about that. And actually, I need to signpost myself to something and some support and help myself, which is brilliant. That's the number one immediate benefit, I think, of going on the training. And then you can go, right, how can I use this for other people now, which is great.
It reminds me of like when you go on holiday or when you go on an airplane anywhere, and they go through the safety instructions and whatnot.
I know what you're going to say.
And they're like, when the mask comes
Oxygen
down,
mask,
put it on yourself
100%,
first, and then
100%.
Right, I'm gonna quote a statistic
Ooh,
from Mental
love a
Health First
stat.
Aid England. All right.
Okay, yeah.
So, research shows that 92% of employees say bringing their whole self to work matters, yet fewer than half feel able to do so. What do you think that tells us about the state of workplace culture today?
What that tells me is that people don't feel psychologically safe in the workplace, and it may be for a number of different reasons. So when we talk about bringing your whole self to work, it might be parts of your identity. So it might be your culture, your religion, it might be your sexual orientation. You may have a hidden disability that's less visible. But it also might just be that you don't feel able to bring your whole self to work because you're a little bit scared. You're a little bit scared of putting your hand up or saying when something's wrong. All of those things, and not being able to bring your whole self to work and participate as much as you would like in work, are because you don't feel the environment is safe enough to do so. And it's probably because you've kind of got some learned behaviours that where either you've brought parts of yourself to work, or perhaps you've seen other people do it, there's been some kind of negative response to that, or it's disadvantaged people in some way, shape or form. So we obviously know stigma is a huge issue around mental health. We know discrimination is a huge issue for lots of different groups of people. But we also know sometimes that sticking your head above the parapet and saying when you don't agree, or something's really, really wrong, or somebody is not doing what they should be doing, is really, really hard, and psychological
Can I
safety
double down
stops
on
them.
that? Let me double
Yeah.
down on that one because, right, so within our profession, so payroll, it generally, if it's not sitting in isolation itself, it will generally sit as either a part of HR or a part of finance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what can happen many times is that decisions are made about concerning the payroll function as well as the I guess the anything to do with pay for the organisation, and it can be made by HR or payroll, and then payroll is informed,
Okay.
but those decisions are being made not actually understanding the intricacies of what the implications are for the decision that's being made. So just in light of what you just said there, what do you think organizations need to do more of to ensure that they're gaining the right outcomes and having the right kind of conversations?
So I think time is an enemy of this. So time and pressure are definitely enemies to what I'm about to say.
Okay.
However, in an ideal world, if you're a decision maker, you've got two ways of making a decision. You can either do it in using dialogue. So you go out and you say, what are our options? What are the pros and cons of them? What do you think? And then you can take that information and make your decision. Or you can do it through debate, which is, this is a decision I'm going to make. Are there any unintended consequences of that you want me to know about? And I think the best leaders and managers that I've ever seen do either or,
nice.
one of those, rather than just making the decision on limited information with no involvement or sort of hindsight of, is there an unintended consequence of that? I think that's where it probably goes wrong.
For any pay professionals listening here, right, and you need to get HR, finance, or whoever aware, then please get up to listen to what Sarah just said.
Yeah, good.
There we go. All right. Just as we've touched on psychological safety, again, if anyone's not seen the My Whole Self campaign, something that Mental Health First Aid England do every year, I think it's around March time you typically do it, don't
Yes,
you?
it is.
And I had the privilege of being on your webinar this
You
year
did,
for that
yes.
as well, which was fantastic and I loved it. But you talked a lot about the link between that and high performance within organisations. And again, for people who are involved and responsible for pay and benefits and various things like that, again, is that link between well-being and performance. So could you talk to us about what the implications could be from a performance point of view in ensuring that your workforce is in a healthy space when it comes to well-being?
Yeah. My Whole Self, when we started to look at psychological safety as part of My Whole Self, it was all based on research from Google. So there's a project called Aristotle within Google that's been run for many, many years. So it's a longitudinal study. And what they did was they did research on all of the different teams across Google. And where there were high-performing teams, they were trying to work out what the key characteristics were, the things that were different about those exceptionally high performers that perhaps weren't present for the other teams and meant that they weren't as high performing. And the number one factor that they've kind of proven through their research over that study over a number of years is how psychologically safe somebody feels in that team. So that ability to say, hey, I've got an idea, or, oh, actually, I'm not quite sure that's right, or can we do it in a different way? That ability to be really open, be yourself, share what you're thinking, learn through failure. You know, we talk about, you know, it's okay to fail fast, fail hard, and then go again kind of thing. They were kind of the key characteristics within the most high performing teams. And so psychological safety has kind of been this phenomena, I think, that there's so much impact data and research data that link it to, if you feel psychologically safe and able to be yourself, to raise issues, ask questions, be challenging in a really healthy way, your team is more likely to be high performing compared to other teams where people aren't bringing everything that they can for lots of different reasons, or they don't feel able to go, that's a stupid idea, or that's a great idea, but wouldn't it be even better if, or you've made a mistake there, let's look at why and unpack it and improve it. They're the differences, really.
If I could ask personally, have you ever been in an environment where you haven't felt psychologically safe?
Oh, yes, I have indeed. And interestingly, those memories are easier to recall than like where it's been. But you always find this, don't you? Like when things impact you in a really negative way, you're more likely to remember them than all the good stuff that kind of stick with you. But yeah, I have actually, and I think when I look back, there's been an odd leader or an odd manager that has really set the tone, and you know what you can and what you can't do. And I've experienced firsthand, putting your head above the parapet and saying, I think we should do this, and then getting a paper thrown at me across a desk and some sharp words, and that makes you more reluctant to do that again in the future. We can all experience it. We all know. We can all probably recall back to a particular manager or a particular leader or a particular organisation where the culture just was not safe for us, and most of us will hopefully not be in those organisations anymore. We voted with our feet, actually, which is a real shame.
It is. To inform those who are listening right now, we've stated mental health first aider a number of times, right? And I know that you're lobbying government as well to ensure that there are mental health first aiders within the workforce. But could you define for our audience what actually is a mental health first aider?
All organisations by law have to have people that are trained in physical first aid, so that if there's an accident at work, there are people there that can support you, help to preserve life, save a life if in some circumstances as well. So they were trained in CPR is the obvious example people would go to. However, in the workplace, from a mental health perspective, there's no requirement for anyone to know about mental health, to know what to do if someone's experiencing a mental health crisis, which
would be mental CPR.
A form of, so mental health crisis, or someone who perhaps has either disclosed to you or you suspect might be having thoughts of suicide. And that for me feels really unbalanced. We quite a lot of people talk about parity of esteem between physical health and mental health, and that might be within the NHS and the amount of funding it gets, it's unequal. But it's also in the workplace and around first aid provision. So going back to the, how can you have a manager who's not trained in some of this stuff? Well, how can you have people who are trained in physical first aid and know how to give CPR and know how to use the accident book and support people, but not know what to do around mental health, which is just as prevalent as physical health issues. So mental health first aid effectively is an equivalent training programme to create mental health first aiders in a workplace. People are trained to understand mental health, how it fluctuates. They're trained to understand the signs that you might see if someone starts to struggle.
Okay.
And they're also trained to how to open up a really safe, structured conversation to understand what's going on for somebody at a point in time and to signpost them to the most appropriate place for support. So they're not a therapist, they're not trained in counsellor. We do talk about mental health conditions and the different types, but only because it helps with empathy and it helps with the different types of signs and symptoms that you might see across a range of different people. And what we know is the earlier that someone can seek support for their mental health, so the earlier the intervention, the quicker and more successful their recovery will be. So they are less likely to go on to develop more severe diagnosable mental health conditions in many cases. So the role of a mental health first aider is very much about prevention, but it's also about crisis support. So people on site that know what to do if they're really concerned about someone's safety as well. So that's the training. We've trained over 1 million people.
Wow.
So we have one of our key metrics as an organisation is our aim is to train 1 in 10 of the population in mental health knowledge and skills. And that's because, I don't know whether you've ever read the Malcolm Gladwell book, The Tipping Point, but he kind of talks about if you want to create systemic and societal change, if you can get 1 in 10 people to change their behaviour, that is a tipping point for it to become a societal norm. So we've got an aim to train 1 in 10. We're at 1 in 31 at the moment, which we're so proud of.
Firmly on the way.
Yeah,
oh my gosh,
we're really proud of it. It means that if you get on a bus or a train or you're at the GP or your child is, at its rugby club playing a match, you're likely to have a trained mental health first aider as part of any of the organisations or places that you are sat within, which can only be a good thing. We're trying to lobby the government to say, come on, this should be mandatory. Because actually, if workplaces have to take this seriously and have to have things like mental health first training, mental health first aid training in place, that can save lives, it can change lives. But we've also talked about it's not just good for the individual, it's good for the business, it's good for performance, it's good for the economy, it's good for the health service. There's a whole bunch of benefits in this. And I think we're at the point now where all of the great people that care enough about wanting to do stuff about this are probably doing it or are about to do it. But in order to get the rest of
Yeah.
workplaces and businesses along, it's got to the point now where we need to mandate it, and it will just have huge benefits.
Gosh, this has been so amazing having you on the show. I want to ask you one final question. Especially as a CEO, coming from a CEO's perspective, right? If you were to say anything to a CEO right now in how they can bring positive change to their organization's well-being, what would it be?
I would say right now, with all the crap that's going on in the world, all the change that's being thrown at us, all the challenges that are happening, particularly in a workplace setting, the one thing that would make the biggest difference is going out and talking to people about how they are, what's really going on at the moment. You know, the classic, if I could wave a magic wand right now and do one thing, actually, what's going to make the biggest difference to you? What's going to make the biggest difference to this organisation, this workplace, this business? You know, if you're not asking those questions, and I get why, but if you're locked in a room trying to solve issues and not visible and not having those conversations, you're probably going to have a bigger impact and a better impact if you go out and talk to people and work out what one thing you could do.
That would listening again, isn't it?
It is. And you just got to get as close to your people as possible.
All right, so to close, we have a tradition on Behind the Button whereby you can ask a question for a future guest. So what question would you like to ask a future guest?
I would say, we talked a bit about self-care earlier, didn't we? So I think it'd be good to hear, like, what's their number one go-to self-care practice.
Oh, nice.
So hopefully that will give other people some ideas of something that they might be able to do.
Love that. That is fantastic. Well, look, Sarah, thank you again. Appreciate you being on the show with us here today. And I'm sure for everyone who's listening and watching, it's going to be a great help and guidance for them.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Don't forget to hit subscribe or follow Behind the Button on your favourite podcast player. And if you're watching us on YouTube, tap the like button, drop us a comment, and make sure you subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And if you've got any questions for us, suggestions for future guests, or want to tell us your own payroll story, we'd love to hear from you. Just email behindthebutton@cipp.org.uk. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.